You're good.
Are you watching us now? Hi, I'm Tim Rogers. I'm the editor of D Magazine, and this is Michael J. Mooney. What's your title?
Writer.
Are you sure?
Unless something's changing.
We could change that right here in this session. This is brand new technology. Several other large brands have attempted to use this new Facebook streaming feature, and they screwed it up, and we're going to do the same thing. Today we are here to talk about the true crime issue, one of my favorite that we've ever published. And Michael has a great story in here that we're going to just pimp as hard as we can. So we have to set it up, first of all, which is a little complicated. I guess we start with the woman who called the office.
Mm-hmm. Angela.
Angela Hans called the office while we were in the midst of producing this issue, and she said she had a story about a murder that had happened 45 years ago that we had actually published in 1975. And it was called Who Killed Beverly Jean Hope? And at that point, the murder was 5 years old and it was still unsolved. I didn't know why she was calling. I just said to the front desk person, at least, don't send this woman through to my phone. And there's a tip for you if you want to get in touch with one of our editors here. Don't call. But she would not be put off, and she wouldn't email me. And so, as I rarely do, I took the call from her. And the story that she tells, you're going to help me keep this concise,
Yep.
okay? The story that she tells is that she believes her brother committed this murder, and she has held this secret for 40 some odd years because her brother was horribly abusive to her, and she only recently learned that he had died, and so she felt that she could unburden herself. And the murder happened, was it in Addison or Dallas proper?
I believe it was Addison at the time. Yeah.
Up near Addison, and that changed?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly. I believe it was Addison.
We staged a takeover of that part of Addison. It was a fairly well-to-do family. A woman was bludgeoned 30 times with a blunt object. And the short version is that Angela's crazy brother, literally he was at one point institutionalized, right?
Several times.
And it also demonstrated that he was a violent person. He was married to the victim's identical twin. And that identical twin, he then married several other a succession of women and moved all over the country. And then he moved back to Oklahoma. And that woman filed for 18 years of back child support.
That's right.
A lot of money back then. And so the woman who called Dee believed that was the motivation. Because he couldn't kill the woman who wanted the child support, because then he would be the obvious suspect in that crime. So he came down from Oklahoma, committed this murder, and then fled. And one of the reasons that she believed that he had fled because she was living in she was living in Colorado.
That's right.
And she had a small, like a shack or something. What was the deal with the shack on her property?
It wasn't on her property. That's where he was staying when he was up living in Colorado, in a small shack with no electricity and hiding his car like he was running from somebody.
And the car he was driving at the time was one that witnesses...
Right, matched the description of a car seen on the street where the murder happened that day.
Right. So we decided we're not going to solve a murder here at D Magazine. We may look like cops, but we're not. We're editors and writers. And so what we decided is that this story is, it's about a woman and her secret, the secret that she's held for about 40 years. And I should add one more thing, which was until about 2 weeks before our deadline, our drop-dead deadline, Mike was working on another story that fell out.
Different crime story.
Because you're incompetent.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that.
And so when this woman, Angela, called me and I got her on the phone, I think I talked to you that day and I said, I think we've got a replacement story, but you're going to have to call this woman and work quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we thought it was perfect because it really was about this woman and her secret. It wasn't about trying to solve a murder. Well, why don't you tell the three people watching what happened, 48 hours before your absolute, was it?
Yeah, well, we're
3 days. We were up against it. Last day, the printer. We've already sent parts of the magazine to the printer, and then Mike calls me.
And we had found an insurance policy, or a series of insurance policies that had been taken out on Beverly Jean Hope, and the first premium was paid 1 week before she was murdered, and they were for three $100,000 policies each.
Because the Hopes had 3 kids.
They had 3 kids, and each one of those policies benefited one child. $300,000 at the time was worth about $2 million now.
And the police didn't know this.
Right. The police at the time had not found that.
So I talked to a cop friend of mine, and he told me that today, if something like this were to happen, that would be, there's a clearinghouse where they can look up life insurance policies like that. But back when the murder happened in 1970, they didn't have that resource. And so, as one of the cops told our writer in 1975, that it was an impossible murder to solve because there was no motive. They had no idea. So that's the gist of the story for those who haven't read it, and you really should, because it's free and it's online. Now, you can also buy a magazine for $5, and I would encourage you to do that too. In fact, you can buy multiple copies. That is within the realms of the law. But you can read it for free, and you should, because we haven't done it really justice in the way we've just. There are several twists and turns to this story.
And a lot of other really good stories in the issue as well.
Yeah, and Brantley Hargrove wrote a great piece for us about the mysterious corpse that showed up buried in a backyard in Oak Cliff. I wrote a story that was an as told to. A Plano cop spent a decade of his career busting a $1 billion gambling ring. He was undercover the entire time. So there are a bunch of fascinating reads in the issue, well worth $5. So let us turn to questions that allegedly have been fed to us by Facebook users about your story. The first one is about the true crime issue itself. Where did the idea come from? And how do we start pulling stories together for the feature? Well, we're geniuses, and that's where it came from. It was the grapes, our mind grapes, and squeezing them. Either that, or we had 3 true crime stories that we wanted to do, and we said, you know what, if we got 3 more, we got a whole issue, and then we don't have to write about anything else. So it was a mix of geniusness and laziness.
We've talked about doing this for a couple of years now, the idea of if we could pull it off, we could get a lot of crime stories to come together around the same time. And a couple other magazines have tried this, but
they haven't done it as well as we have. Actually, Los Angeles Magazine, the city magazine of Los Angeles, did it about 2 years ago, I think, and they did a great job too.
There's the New Yorker. I've never heard of it before, but it was a
small regional publication.
They've done some sort of true crime thing.
Yeah, and it was funny because our owner, Wick Allison, when we first brought the idea to him, said, "Don't do that. Nobody reads true crime. That doesn't sell." And it has sold very well in the newsstand for us, actually, so far. So
and it shows like Serial and.
Right, and then The Making of a Murderer coming out didn't hurt either. Okay, so what was Angela's reaction? Angela, again, is the woman who called me at the magazine. What was her reaction to Grover's disinterest? So if you don't know, Grover is the husband of the victim, the guy who took out the life insurance policies right before his wife was murdered, and that you talked to several times.
Yeah.
And tell everybody what happened the first time you called him before you knew about the life insurance policy.
He walked me through. He discovered his wife's body and walked me through that day, and was very honest, and we talked for a while, and ultimately, said he would prefer that people not do this story. It would not be great for his family.
And part of his reasoning there was that Angela had a theory, but that's all it was a theory, and her brother was dead anyway, so what good would it do, even if she was right, that it would just bring up old wounds?
And Grover's 87 now. He for a long time was, active with the police, trying to get this, going down to the station, talking to them, trying to get this solved. Took out ads, looking for material that had been stolen, did a lot to try and solve the crime. And interacting with the police at least. And so, to some extent, he was telling me that he was just tired of this. He was just, he didn't think that there was going to be a resolution.
And we had a long conversation here at the magazine about whether it was appropriate to do the story. And we decided that, we had a responsibility to be respectful to the family, because there are still people that live here in Dallas. But that it was really Angela's story. It was her personal story, and she had a right to tell it. And it did serve the public interest to know that there is at least a legitimate theory of hers about who committed this crime. So the question is, what was Angela's reaction to Grover's disinterest in her theory? He wasn't really disinterested.
Right. No. He sat his entire family down, and they talked about this, and they debated whether they were going to go to the police with it, and he told me he thinks there's at least a 10% chance that she's right, but because the man that she's accusing is dead, and because there's no actionable evidence, he didn't think that there was much they could do.
Yeah, and several people who've read this story have asked me if there's a statute of limitations on a crime like that. There isn't. There's no statute of limitations on murder. Grover offers in the story to find financial records that prove his wife's insurance money went straight to their children. Did the reporter or police follow up on that?
Yeah. We talked to his adult children, and I reached out to the estate planning attorney who would help put that together. So we did follow up, and the children, confirmed that money went directly into their trust.
Although they'd never touched it, if I'm
right.
Each one said that they had not had access to the money.
Right. It had been accruing and had been invested on their behalf. They'd not actually touched it.
Well, once you discovered, this is another question from a reader, and remind people what you're doing for the new people who join. Oh, hi, I'm Tim Rogers. To re-establish what we're doing here, I'm the editor of D Magazine, and this is Michael J. Mooney, who claims to be a staff writer, and we are talking about the true crime issue and the story that Mike wrote for it about a murder that happened 45 years ago.
This is going well so far.
Do you feel like it is?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
It's got to be better than Mashable's presentation on Facebook so far. Hi, Mashable. Let's see here. Once you discovered the new information, and we're reading questions submitted by you, our Facebook friends, theoretically. Once you discovered new information about the insurance policies, you had a follow-up conversation with Grover. How did that go, Michael?
It was interesting. I asked him about the insurance policies, and at first he didn't remember them, and I began to read from some court documents.
Now, something is curious about that, because the insurance, the reason you discovered that is because it was online, and the IRS wanted some of that money.
Right.
And that case dragged on for more than a decade, and was actually kind of a watershed case in terms of how that...
On how inheritance and that kind of thing are handled, yeah.
So, I thought it was interesting that a case would have occupied a decade of, at least a portion of Grover's life for a decade, and it was a groundbreaking case, and he didn't remember it. And otherwise, a sharp dude, right? I mean,
yeah, he also said he's, excuse me,
bless you, Michael.
Generally not a believer in insurance. Didn't take out a lot of insurance in various aspects.
But yet he
of
took
life.
out these 3 policies.
He remembered it when I started reading it to him, and explained that this was regular estate planning,
which it is, obviously.
Had been months in advance. They wanted to get cash on hand in case anything had ever happened to he or his wife, and they had the executor of the trustee of the insurance as his business partner,
right?
Who also was one of the people who told police where Grover had been all morning at work.
Grover was at work, and the reason that, or how he found his wife's body was because his wife was supposed to meet a friend at Neiman Marcus for lunch, and when she didn't show up, that friend called Grover at work and said she was worried, and then Grover went over to the house, and that's where he made the grisly discovery. So it's also interesting, and Grover told you this the first time you talked to him, that the first phone call he made after he found the body.
Yeah, his first call was to his coworker, to his business partner.
The trustee of the life insurance policy.
He was also the trustee of the life insurance policy, yeah. And when the police got there, according to reports from the time, at least one business partner was already on the scene. With them, so.
Has Grover, or anyone from the Hope family, contacted you regarding the story, or more so the tone of the story's ending?
Not since the story's been published.
Now, and that's really is kind of interesting, because you had 2 fairly lengthy conversations with Grover, and in another twist of the story, which isn't in the version that you wrote, Grover got remarried after his wife was murdered. He got remarried in about a year.
Within a year.
Within a year, and so he had 3 kids from that first marriage, and then from his second marriage, he had a child named Michael Hope. And it turns out that I worked with Michael Hope a number of years ago at a publication called The Met. So as the family asked us not to write this story, and after you discovered the insurance policies, I then had to call this person I'd worked with many years ago and explain to him our thinking as to why we were doing it. And as you may well imagine, it was not a happy, jokey conversation. So I know the guy, not well, but I haven't heard back from him either. I would like to know what they think. I mean, it's a really personal matter about their family, and I know when I've written stories, it's the thing that I sit there and it just racks me. Like, what is the subject of the story?
Yeah.
Think about it.
It's really tough. Yeah.
It seems that Angela Hans, again, she's the woman who called me that day, is traumatized from her childhood experiences with her brother Everett, and rightfully so. Yeah. I think she really, truly believes Everett could have done this. However, the evidence against Grover, and I wouldn't call it evidence, I would just say it's information that the police didn't know at the time, Given the records that you discovered regarding the life insurance policies, do you personally think that Angela's story has merit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he's a viable suspect for this crime. Even Grover said there's at least a 10% chance that this guy had done this. He had a history of violence. He had access to a plane and had a car that was seen that matched the description of one seen that day, and was married to this woman's twin who was suing him at the time. So there are a lot of reasons to believe that he may have done this.
And police will tell you that when a victim is brutalized that badly, that it's almost always somebody who knows them. And so it would make a lot of sense that her crazy brother, married to an identical twin, he's clearly angry with her because she wants a bunch of money from him, and there he is looking at the same face, as the woman that he was married to. So he did know her.
Yeah, Angela makes a really compelling case. She's thought about this for a long time. She wrote a 14-page letter kind of outlining her reasons for believing this. Yeah, I think Everett is definitely a viable suspect.
And you haven't heard from Angela either, have you?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, I'd like to know what she thinks of the story. Would you ever reach out to someone like that and ask them?
I never, after the story comes out, I never want to be the person that reaches out. I kind of want to, because it's up to them if they want to talk to me.
Yeah.
It's awkward and tense. Generally, I stay in touch with almost everybody I've ever written about.
Except Chris Kyle.
Yeah. I mean, still members of that, people I talked to for that story, I'm definitely still in touch with. But yeah. So I'm curious what they think.
So Angela's probably watching. If you are, send Mike an email. Call him. He'll take your call. The story mentioned the cops looked at more than 100 different people, including a milkman. There was a construction site nearby. All those people were interviewed. Do they keep time logs of how many hours they spend in a case like that? It'd be fascinating to see just how much time and effort was spent on the especially unsettling murder of a lovely and well-known white woman back in the 70s. Do you think that played into it?
I think that they probably would have spent more time looking for trying to solve that crime than they might have somebody of a different persuasion, especially back then.
Yeah.
It's hard to know. I couldn't, records were really scarce. There were almost no police records that we could get a hold of, and the police didn't really want to talk about this very much. So we don't know exactly how many hours they logged. In stories from that time and then going forward, they outlined a lot of people that they talked to, some by name, and then they looked in depth at.
And we should say the two cops who investigated, they're dead.
Yeah.
The police file, you were told by Grover, has gone missing. And I guess that's not, you almost want to hear the dun-dun when you hear that the police file is missing, but a police file from that long ago, that's not terribly unusual.
Not unusual at all. Yeah. Especially at the city where it happened didn't even have investigators at the time.
Which is why Dallas cops were involved with it. Did the police think, now this is another part of the story, that the woman that the victim was supposed to meet for lunch at Neiman Marcus, she had been sexually assaulted in her house in the neighborhood, how long before the murder?
Not long, within a year or 2 years.
Okay.
Certainly in everybody's mind. And it was a horrific crime where she'd been tied up and he had gasoline thrown on her and she'd escaped. And they convicted somebody of that crime from a different neighborhood. And Grover actually told me Beverly Jean Hope had gone to that trial and sat there to support her friend every day during the trial, kind of, as Grover told me, staring daggers at the other side. And so Grover wondered if maybe one of that guy's friends hadn't come up, or if they'd gotten the wrong guy, if they'd convicted the wrong person and that guy had come back. There was always some possibility that was the case too.
So to answer the question, yes, the police did think it was unusual, and they had investigated that angle.
Yeah, that was one of the first places they looked.
So the murder weapon, there's a few more questions here, and you can submit questions right now if you'd like to, and we'll just ignore them, but feel free to do so. The murder weapon was a fireplace log, and when Grover arrived at his house after being warned that something might be amiss by his wife's lunch companion, he walks in the house and he fears that something has happened.
Right. The story he tells me is he called out. He got to the house, went in the front door, called out to his wife, saw her car was there, so expected that she would answer. When she didn't answer, he became alarmed. So he picked up a fireplace log that was leaning up against the fireplace, and began to carry it because he said he wanted to have something if there was somebody else there. And then he went and saw that her purses had been kind of spread out along the bed, and he calmed down because he knew that this was something she did a lot when she switched bags. So he put the log down. Later, it turned out that was the murder weapon.
So the question is, did the police think it was odd the attacker didn't bring his own weapon?
I don't know that. I didn't see that in any of the reports. I do think that that's interesting. And, you know, or if somebody brought a log to a house. You know, I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah. And then what about Everett? So Everett is the crazy brother that Angela thinks committed the crime. Did the police ever interview him at the time?
So we know that the police talked to Jean's
the identical
sister,
twin,
because she had been on the phone with her earlier that day, and so that's part of the timeline that they put together. It's not clear if they talked to Everett or not, and it's not clear.
But the police did interview June.
They did.
And we don't know whether or not she brought up Everett.
We don't.
Yeah. Without the police file, without the file or the cops around, we wouldn't know it. What was the original author's take on the case? And the original author would be Tom Stevenson, who wrote our 1975 story. Tom Stevenson's a crazy bastard. I don't know. You'd need to ask him yourself. Trivia, Tom Stevenson started the Greenville Avenue St. Patrick's Day Parade. How do you like that? File it.
Very nice guy, too.
Remember that all the time. And now he leads people on safaris. But he's crazy. Why did they decide to, that'd be you and I guess, why did they decide to include it in the Greatest Crimes issue? I think we answered that question. We were desperate for a story. We had a big hole in the magazine, and then Mike stepped into the gap.
Yeah, I mean, I like calling it the greatest crime issue, too. I think that's
the greatest crime story ever written.
A nice...
By Michael.
That sounds like a D magazine title.
The greatest bowling story ever written.
One of the worst parents ever,
So we have some associates on the other side of this camera who have been monitoring this ridiculousness for the past however long. Have we received any questions that...
Will you guys do another true crime issue?
Well, that's an excellent question.
If you enjoyed it, you have to buy several of these to guarantee it.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly, to answer that question, sometimes we're the victim of our own success. So we'll do an issue like this, and we'll think, well, we really need to do that again because clearly readers enjoyed it and people bought it on the newsstand, and we're a for-profit enterprise, and so newsstand sales are important to us. But then we wonder right after that if we should do it again because of just repeating ourselves, and that gets pretty boring pretty quickly. So, but the good news is people are always out there killing each other and stealing money and doing horrible things, and a lot of those stories make for great reading, and they help us learn more about our city. So I wouldn't say no, but I ain't ready to say yes. Can I answer that question?
You did. Beautiful.
It was an excellent question. Can I give a shout out to whoever posed it?
Cuts by Joe.
Hey, Cuts by Joe. It's a great question. If we ever decide to do this again, Cuts by Joe, you are welcome to join us and pose another question because you've proven yourself a worthy questioner.
Michael, invite the editor of a different publication into our meeting.
What is Cuts by Joe?
We don't know.
What is Cuts by Joe? It's a barbershop.
That's what I
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go. I got another one.
Yeah. Or it could be a moil,
Okay,
right?
we have another one from David Burrows. He says, "Are you guys planning more live podcasts?"
Ooh.
David, I know you, so you can send me an email when we wrap this up, and you can tell me whether it was ridiculous or. So you guys need to know we are staring at a phone, sitting on a table, leaning against a tape dispenser. So because you can't do it, what Facebook doesn't let you do it with the desktop.
I did my best.
No, I'm sure it's great. But David, you'll tell us.
This is cutting edge. This
It
is
is cutting edge.
yeah. This is the future.
David, you'll tell us whether we should do this again. I'm serious about that. Let me know what you think. All right. With that.
That's about it.
Thank you very much for your time and attention. Wait a minute, I have a hand in the back.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the realm of true crime,
Yes.
and a story that Mike Mooney wrote, what do you think about the Ethan Couch situation?
Well, so we should say that Mike, back in May, wrote a cover story for us called "The Worst Parents Ever," and it was about Tanya and Fred Couch, the parents of the affluenza teen. And you had access to a bunch of court documents that no one had ever seen before. And if I could describe the way that story made me feel about Ethan is that it's really easy to vilify that kid, and he makes it very easy. But when you learn about his upbringing, there is a certain amount of sympathy I think you elicited with that story. It gave a fuller picture of it.
At least understand, whether you feel sympathy or not, you understand how he came to be.
Gives you a deeper understanding. So and that story has blown. I mean, obviously, since they went on the lam in Mexico, that story for us online has blown up quite a bit because it's the most complete tale of beginning to end what happened there. I'm surprised actually you didn't ask to go to Mexico.
I asked many times. Why are you saying this? I asked you 10 minutes ago.
I'm going to
Yeah.
pretend you haven't asked to go
Yeah.
to Mexico because he's still down there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be an interesting. You'd be like Sean Penn going down to talk to Ethan.
There's no, except for my thing with Madonna in the 80s, there's nothing that Sean Penn and I have in common.
What was the question?
What would your take on what's going on?
Oh yeah, what's your
Yeah.
take, Mike? Give us a
I
hot
mean,
take.
in some ways-
besides, I want a plane ticket to Mexico.
Yeah, no, that's it. No, I mean, we probably should have seen this coming. We probably should have seen this kind of inevitability.
So you're saying you should have gone to Puerto Vallarta and waited for
I
him to show up?
probably should have had an apartment there waiting for years now.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I'm checking out the real estate. We'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Well, he's back. She's back and faces more jail time than he actually does.
And she's out of jail now. She's been paroled.
Have you tried to contact her?
No, but I
Everybody in the world is trying to contact her.
yeah,
right
that's
now.
what I figure.
Yeah, you gotta drive up to her house.
I might know some addresses that other people might not know.
Mm.
So we'll see.
What a braggart. Okay, once again, buy the True Crime issue. It's on newsstands now. It's $4.99. It's worth twice the price. Thank you for reading. Thank you for suffering through this wonderful video stream thing. Say goodbye, Michael.
Bye.